What I'd like to do now is I'd like to introduce Sara Chambers. Sara Chambers is the Boards and Regulations Advisor for the Alaska Department of Commerce, Community, and Economic Development. She has authored the state's guides to right touch regulation and provides policy governance and operational advice to boards and commissions across all state departments. She also serves on the faculty of the International Council on Licensing, Enforcement, and Regulation. Sara is a former Juneau Assembly member and was named one of Alaska's top 40 under 40 by the Alaska Journal of Commerce. Please join me in welcoming Sara Chambers.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, everyone. As Brian said, my name is Sara Chambers. I am with the Alaska Department of Commerce, Community, and Economic Development. It's a pleasure to be up here again. We met yesterday when I had a different hat on, leading you in the flag song and the national anthem. Presenters have been asked to disclose a bit of their Alaska origin story. So I'd like to share that my husband and I moved to Juneau in 2001 when he transferred with the Associated Press as the correspondent covering the Alaska State Legislature. And as I sat on the dock next to the Alaska Commercial Fishermen's Memorial on our first cool, misty June day, clutching a latte in one hand and a parcel of freshly smoked salmon collars in the other, a giant cruise ship blew its horn and I started crying because I knew I was home. Since that day 25 years ago, we've raised 2 boys here, one of whom dreams of attending UAF in 2028, and the other is moving back home this spring after completing his degree in North Dakota. He would have attended a University of Alaska program, but it was a little difficult to find a college quarterback roster spot in our state. He's accepted an offer to serve the state as an Alaska wildlife trooper and will be returning with his Gustavus-born wife. Fortunately, they will be improving the state's in-migration statistics by bringing a +1, our first grandchild, who's due in April. So we're celebrating that statistical improvement. Thank you. Thanks for celebrating that with me. But it's an honor to be here with you all today to introduce rural innovation expert and keynote speaker, Molly Pyle. I was invited to introduce Molly because of the department's commitment to promote a healthy economy, strengthen communities, and protect consumers. While the Department of Commerce covers a wide range of topics, I want to share a few of our efforts to encourage local economic development, support small businesses, and represent Alaska on a global stage. First, high-quality, affordable internet is critical to rural economic development and innovation. The Alaska Broadband Office oversees the state of Alaska's efforts to reach this goal, administering the federal Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, or BEAD program, which allocates funds to expand broadband access for underserved and unserved communities in Alaska. So to give you an idea of the scope of this project, we've submitted 28 projects for federal funding in the amount of $630 million, serving more than 46,000 locations across the state. More than 50% of those locations are in rural Alaska. We expect initial groundbreaking this year with final connections completed in 2030. Since 2023, our Division of Investments has worked diligently to forge a strong and strategic partnership with Sealaska's Native Community Development Financial Institution, Spruce Root. This partnership is designed to leverage the unique strengths of both organizations, expanding economic opportunities for Alaskans, and supporting job creation through the launch and growth of small business enterprises. This collaboration also exemplifies a successful public-tribal partnership that provides additional financing opportunities to assist the startup and expansion of small businesses in Alaska's rural communities. Among its many development projects, including mining revenue sharing with ANCSA corporations and supporting diverse sustainable energy options across the state, the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority, or ADA, leads the way with disciplined financial investments and successful execution of public-private partnerships. As one of Southeast Alaska's most important industrial assets, the Ketchikan shipyard is positioned for expanded utilization, year-round employment, and long-term economic impact. This new chapter at the Ketchikan shipyard, as one example, is not just a story of transition, it's a story of revitalization, partnership, and a bold vision for Alaska's maritime future. Our Division of Community and Regional Affairs runs the Made in Alaska program, promoting products made, manufactured, or handcrafted in the state. We operate Made in Alaska markets, and we continue to expand. In an effort to market Alaska's talent, the Department of Commerce and Alaska-based e-commerce company Voyage are partnering to launch the first ever dedicated e-commerce shopping site exclusively featuring Made in Alaska artists. Founded in 2019 in Skagway, Voyage represents a community of more than 400 small businesses and artisans in over 65 communities across Alaska. But perhaps most exciting to summit attendees is the launch of the Alaska Business Initiative, the state's marketing effort to attract outside investment in Alaska. The resources on the initiative's website are constantly expanding, and you can access them at alaskabusinessinitiative.org. That's alaskabusinessinitiative.org. We're also engaged in a research study on some of Alaska's emerging industries. This original research and analysis will arm policymakers and industry leaders like you with data and insight on how our state compares to competitors across the U.S. and globally. By benchmarking Alaska's aerospace assets, data center technology, natural resources, and port infrastructure against peer regions in the lower 48, Canada, and Europe, this data will offer an objective and fact-based roadmap for strengthening the state's economic competitiveness. We hope you will find these tools as useful as you join us in reaching this shared goal. Now, we turn to a leader at the forefront of rural innovation across the country, Molly Pyle. Molly is currently the Chief Program Officer at the Center on Rural Innovation, often referred to as CORI, where she works with rural communities across the country to build strong entrepreneurial ecosystems and grow scalable tech startups in rural America. Prior to joining CORI, she supported social impact startups at MIT Solve and led accelerator programming at Singularity Education Group, a company offering executive educational programs, a business incubator, and business consultancy services. Additionally, through the U.S. State Department, Molly has collaborated with international women leaders in STEM and entrepreneurship, as well as helped design global summits serving more than 2,000 executives and founders across 15 countries. With graduate training from Columbia University focused on social enterprise and international social welfare, Molly brings a powerful blend of rural strategy, innovation, and global perspective. Please join me in welcoming Molly Pyle.
Wow, thank you so much, Sarah, for the kind intro. I am truly honored to be here. I am not from Alaska. I actually hail from a small town in Northeast Florida called St. Augustine. I was born and raised there, and perhaps unlike kids from Juneau, but like a lot of kids from other rural places, I couldn't wait to leave. I was just counting the days till I could move on, get out of there, get out of that one-horse town, and go off to bright lights in big city. That was the vision I had for myself from a young age. So fast forward to me, I'm in New York City, I'm doing my graduate training, I get a job offer, I move out to San Francisco, I'm working at a high-tech startup and social impact accelerator. Everything is really exciting, it's unfolded exactly as I hoped, and yet I found there was a little something missing in my soul. Every time I'd go back home, go back to see my friends and family who I love so dearly, I'd talk about the exciting work I was doing, and wasn't connecting with them. I wouldn't see that sort of spark or the excitement that I was really feeling and trying to convey. And I thought, it's not because folks here don't have good ideas. I know there's innovation opportunities everywhere. I'm starting to get that. It's that there aren't the resources, the programs, the encouragement that you can actually do this here. And why should it be that the people who are just privileged enough or just so happen to pick that geographic lottery ticket to be in Silicon Valley are the only ones who get to be the creators of all of this technology and innovation that's in our hands right now? I started to think, what would a world look like where everybody in our country and in our world was actually empowered and supported to be a builder? How cool or how different would technology, would apps, would services, would products be if they reflected more of the diversity of our entire country and our world, rather than this one little bubble that I was really immersed in but starting to get kind of sick of? So I started to do some research of, are there any other people or organizations thinking about this? Does anybody sort of feel the same way, that like surely we can decentralize some of this opportunity so that more folks in our country can have access? And I learned that there was an organization called the Center on Rural Innovation, whose mission and really reason for existence was exactly this. It's founded with the sole purpose of trying to close the rural opportunity gap and create more opportunities for rural people to work in tech, start startups, and be the solvers of the problems that impact us and impact so many folks in our country. So I joined the Center on Rural Innovation about 6 years ago as the first person to help advise local leaders. We partner directly with rural folks. We don't own or operate any sort of institution or co-working space, but rather partner with local leaders to help them find what opportunities, trainings, startup incubation pathways would resonate best with their community. How can we help you build that? How can we kind of give you a playbook that's going to really work in your community? So that's our reason for existence. That's who Corey is. We are fundamentally convinced that small towns are home to big ideas, and new models of economic development can empower rural communities across the United States to participate in the nation's growing tech economy. And like I said, it's personal to me because being from my small town, originally not feeling like there was really anything but like 3 or 4 jobs. You know, my mom's a teacher, my dad's a realtor. I don't know, what else is there for me? So I started to really get hooked on this mission and believe deeply there should be more. Remote work unlocks so much more. Starting tech startups, learning new skills. So I'm really proud to say I've come full circle, and I live back in my hometown now, and I work remotely. Corey is a distributed organization, so we have a little headquarters in rural Vermont where our founder is from, because he was also convinced I shouldn't have to leave my hometown of Vermont just because I want to have a really big career and do bigger things than I've seen folks around me believe is possible for them. But it's not a problem of capability. It's a problem of seeing what truly is the opportunities all around us. Because in the age of the internet, there shouldn't be a limit to where tech talent and visionary ideas can thrive. This is something I feel so strongly about, and I've heard it so much from different folks here. We should not have to leave our hometowns or the places that we love in search of better jobs and better opportunities. We shouldn't have to see industries that our families have worked for and been innovating for generations, like manufacturing and agriculture, be transformed by people who have never stepped foot on a farm or a factory, right? We are the folks who know best what kinds of problems are really impacting our industry, our world, our lives. So why not us as the folks who are driving the solutions? We have the technology, we have the tools. It's just about creating the momentum and seeing that as a real opportunity. And we know there's some gaps. We know that this is really a big problem. The data shows us that rural America, this is the rural opportunity gap, has been left behind in the rise of the knowledge economy and the tech economy. So if you look at that top line there, that is non-rural. It's had some really steady growth in employment since 1979. Knowledge economy has largely concentrated in non-rural areas over the last 40 years. Versus this green line on the bottom, this rural line showing not really recovered, just a little bit getting back up from that 2020 dip you can see, but ultimately prosperity is increasingly concentrated in large metro areas, and this gap continues to widen. And when we think about how this happened, we can look at 3 major forces: the rise of automation, the rise of globalization, and a decline in American entrepreneurship that we've been seeing since the 70s. And I don't have to explain this to y'all. Of course, we all know, we feel it deeply. We're in this room. The gaps and challenges of this rural opportunity, growing divide, are really creating a lot of pains for us. Economic decline, a lack of diversification, workforce gaps, out-migration, such a big theme of what we're talking about, population loss, aging demographics, low civic and institutional capacity. I'm not placing blame by naming these problems. It's just important to understand what we're up against, so then we can create really clear strategies for solving it. And we know that it's solvable, but we also know it's going to take some time. Because rural America, we've got a solid share of a total workforce at 12%, but only 5% of rural America is represented in the tech workforce. So there's quite a bit of a gap here in just having parity at all for rural folks who exist and seeing us represented in the tech workforce. However, interest is there. This gap can be closed. Nearly 60% of rural adults are interested in having a tech job or perhaps becoming a startup founder. And why this matters is because tech jobs and startups have an incredible impact, an outsized positive impact on rural economies. If you think about this graph here, the mean annual wage of rural workers by digitization level, so it just keeps on getting up and up way beyond the mean rural wage for folks who are not in digital or tech careers. You also think about, for every one tech job that's created, 3 to 5 new jobs are then created by other firms locally. So there's a multiplier effect for tech jobs. It's not just a tech explosion, but many other different kinds of jobs that are then created to support that. So you think about that growth, also what's happening in the tech and computer field, it's growing 3 times faster than any other field and than the national average of other occupations. We also think about the power of startups in that you might not realize, or you might be surprised to know, that the Kauffman Foundation reports firms or startups less than 5 years old are responsible or create nearly all net new job growth in the United States. So it's not actually your megacorps or your Fortune 500s who are really driving economic prosperity and job growth. It's small entrepreneurs and local businesses who are putting folks to work in their community. And that's what we love to see, but we want to know, how can rural communities do it more? How can they enable more tech jobs, more startups? Later in this presentation, I'm going to take you through a model that we work with rural communities to apply to their community in their economic development strategy, and I'll also show you some examples of what other places have done and what's working for them. Because we have a little joke here at Corey. We like to say, once you've seen one rural community, you've seen exactly one rural community. They're all different. They've all got their own unique strengths and challenges and culture and historical context. So acknowledging there's a lot of variation in this, we've also found some best practices that can be applicable to think about. So for startups, thinking about innovation spaces, physical hubs, gathering places, thinking about programming, and we're going to go through a lot more detail of what this program can look like, or opportunities to train people at every level, and also investor networks. So getting access to capital, getting that first dollar in so that you know you can continue to scale and grow. And looking at this in parallel with jobs. So what's your tech workforce like? What kind of skills are needed? Who's training up that tech workforce? Are the local employers and talent actually talking to each other and matched well? And are there STEM programs and other kinds of training opportunities that can give folks the, first look into what it might be like to have a completely different career than anyone in your family or anyone who you might know has ever had before. Because so much of this also is just about mindset shift. You gotta believe that this is possible for someone like you, and if you don't see somebody with your accent or from your community or who looks like you, it's so much harder to do that. But that's why we really help communities rally around a vision, an opportunity of what we call tech-based economic development to create more of a culture and a community where this feels possible. So tech-based economic development is certainly not a one-size-fits-all approach, but rather a strategy to intermingle with your broader picture of how your community is going to grow over time. It can help you be more flexible and diversify and attract investment, diversify that economic base, retain talent, create those good, high-paying jobs that actually are future-proof and have those high wages for folks that can continue on in the community. And I want to highlight the future-proof piece especially because so many places in rural America, and I'm sure Alaska, have been impacted by lots of outside forces beyond our control. And that really changes the way we may think about what's possible for us. Whereas tech-based economic development provides a model or a way that we can really regain the ability to shape the control of our economic future. And I want to really emphasize this, not about becoming Silicon Valley. Like I told y'all when I started, I got a taste of that, and I said, there's some pros here, there's certainly some really good things that can be transferred, but not everybody needs to take everything from here and R&D and rip off and duplicate it in their own community, right? There's so much more we can do, so much more nuance that we can think about building innovation economies in rural that doesn't accelerate some of the same issues, inequities that Silicon Valley has created in their tech boom. So it's not about creating a culture that doesn't resonate with your community, but rather finding these opportunities for a shift where a tech economy and an innovation economy feels like a natural path or a natural part of your community's bigger ecosystem. And I say this because we really truly believe innovation has to work alongside your Main Street businesses and not in place of them. So I like this infograph sort of to show you a hub. Think of a physical space. Melody talked a lot about the sort of emotional spaces or like informal gathering places, and I'm talking about a real piece of infrastructure here, like an innovation hub or a co-working space, but the opportunity there remains the same. You think about this space underpinned by, of course, maybe higher education, really good broadband like Sara was talking about, and some capital. On the first floor of a mixed-use space like this, and imagine it maybe in your Main Street of your rural community, there might be some arts and culture and amenities, like a coffee shop, a gallery, something cool to just bring people in who have otherwise no idea or interest in whatever this building might be. Co-working space, innovation hub, I don't know, I'm just gonna go get a coffee, or I'm just gonna go check out some cool art. But they get into the space, and then they start to think, what else is here? Maybe there's art, there's cool people upstairs, or there's all these glass windows where I see people typing and I'm starting to get curious what's happening in that conference room. So they start to ask around, hey, what is this? What is co-working? Oh, I can start a business, I can have a private office in this space. So maybe there's room here for some, flex desks, maybe an incubator or an accelerator program where startups can start to get training, build community. Maybe on the other side in green, there's a future of work or digital skills training opportunity. And maybe on the top, there's some lofts and living space for folks who just moved to town and want to understand, how they can embed themselves in a community. And this is really an opportunity for virtuous collisions, as it's sometimes called, where I'm a founder, I have a digital marketing agency, and I am in the shared kitchen of this co-working space, and I'm just reheating my coffee, and a local entrepreneur stops by, and they're also ready to reheat their coffee, and we start just chit-chatting, and it turns out they need some digital marketing services. And just right there, there's a connection, there's a customer, there's an opportunity created for that entrepreneur. And there's also the sense of, hey, I'm not alone in building this. There are people here who are also hustling, figuring it out, trying to make something happen that's really hard. Maybe they've never done it before, but we're in it together. And I cannot express to you enough how important that sense of community is for entrepreneurs. And for folks, if many in the room who are, how isolating it can be. And so these kinds of spaces and places can really help create more of that community and support for individuals to know, I can do this. Or if I fail, it's okay. I can dust myself off and try again, because I've got the backing of folks in this space, in my community, who believe that I'm doing something worthwhile. We have a little taco truck outside because it's sort of an homage to how small businesses and these kinds of startups are also really important, but how part of our focus is on tech-based entrepreneurship. So there's incredible organizations, SCORE, SBDC, co-starters that help small business entrepreneurs start food trucks like this taco truck. But what does a community have that helps people start tech startups? That's the Corey question, and that's why we believe these kinds of spaces are really important. We want to honor all that helps people start your taco truck, and we also want to create the opportunities where if somebody has an idea for the next DoorDash that's born out of their taco truck, they also know where they can go and do that and find some tech talent or some support to validate their market and to go forth and actually create that business. So this is how it works in a really nice, cohesive way where innovation working alongside and with Main Street also can happen in a physical space and a place to really unlock what folks feel is possible for themselves by having the power and the backing of a community. So if your community may not quite be here yet, we can look at these 3 pillars and think it's probably because one might be weak or not as connected as it could be. Talent. Where is the skilled workforce that can really power and push forward this innovation? Innovation itself. Where are the sources of ideas coming from? Where are the solutions? Where are people finding opportunity to go out and create something that they know is going to move the needle on something that people are really facing and struggling with right now? And then adoption. How are businesses and communities actually going to put new technology to work, new ideas, and start to implement and make these changes so that it can feel more real and viable to have a rural tech ecosystem? Hey, there are tech-enabled businesses here. I just learned yesterday in the innovation breakout session, Juno Cleaning, really cool example of a very straightforward traditional business concept that is done incredibly well by being more tech-enabled, having a really polished website, having really easy ways to book things online. So that's an example of where you start to shift your culture locally by showing folks, hey, how easy and how nice. They have 100% 5 stars on Google reviews, and people are really resonating with some of their technological shifts, creating a little bit more of a digital community bit by bit. Just things like that is where it starts. Doesn't have to be that, 6 people are in the incubator building an AI company, even though I'm pretty sure that's happening here too. So when you think about this, a lot of it is powered by, of course, local leaders. People coming together, again, from very diverse backgrounds and realizing we can do something about this. Different folks from, your university system, from your economic development organizations, all across your community. It doesn't have to be just one organization, but teaming up to really see there's power in numbers here. Let's think about what each of us can contribute and where we can go with this, and then let's assess what we actually have to build on. What are some of our strengths? What are some of those natural gifts that make people love this place, like Melody talked about? And then, what strategies would make sense to really build upon that so that people can feel like this is something truly for them? You don't need a computer science degree. You don't need to have built a tech startup before. You just need to feel like there's an on-ramp for you that resonates with you. So how do we do that so that it creates this pathway to a thriving ecosystem? You can start. We often help rural leaders think through a core list of some basic assets that help your community build a tech economy and thrive. So looking at those quality of life assets very upfront, and this is just a hypothetical, kind of seeing where you are, red, yellow, and green. How's our broadband? How's that infrastructure for innovation, like co-working spaces? How is our capacity? Do we even have the time to take on something like this? How is our talent pipeline? Where are folks being trained and educated? How is access to tech jobs? How easy is it once you graduate to get a tech job? Is there entrepreneurship support? Is there access to capital? So not really trying to boil the ocean, but rather as a community, taking a real honest look at where are we strong, where are we red, yellow, green, and what makes sense for us to prioritize now. Maybe it's just 2 of these things. Maybe it's, we really need to go all in on our innovation infrastructure, or I'll pick one that's red here, our talent pipeline for this hypothetical community, and really start to think about perhaps what greater partnerships we could use with the incredible training institutions there are here. From adult education opportunities, certifications, boot camps, what are the higher ed institutions offering? How well does it match with what our workforce and our industry and employers need? And how can we strengthen those connections? So I am certainly not going to get into this too much, but just to highlight the community assets like you've heard from some of our other brilliant keynotes, how do you think about what makes a place nice? Because this quality of life, like Tom mentioned, is so important. People will trade income for quality of life. They will literally choose places based on, recreation, arts and culture, better health, what kind of food options are available. I'll never forget I was doing a brainstorming session with some entrepreneurs in rural Oklahoma, kept trying to talk about what opportunities or what things are really challenging for you right now that if we could bring one thing to this community would really feel like, wow, now we've got it. And people kept saying an Indian food restaurant. I was like, yes, Indian food is delicious, but that is not quite what we're talking about when we mean how can your community move forward into a tech economy. But it's real for those folks. People want to know, hey, there are good places to eat. Are there fun things to do when I'm off work? Are there great schools to send my kids to? Is broadband here really good so I can work from home? So not at all underestimating the power of some of these community assets to overall create the possibilities and strengthen the viability of a tech economy. And that's kind of why I love that I got to go last after we've heard from Melody and Tom about just how rich and important it is to build strong quality of life leading places, and how that's not just great for fun and living in a beautiful community, it also has an outsized economic impact for what your community can turn into. Like I said, this quality of life continues to just build and build for your tech economy and your innovation economy as well. If I can see there's fun things to do, and I can see that, just like Melody said, there's a different community maybe than where I grew up now. It's changed, it's grown up too. I might want to come back, or I might want to see myself here for the long haul. And if I was a high school student as I was in my community, that would have been ridiculous to think previously. But now, knowing that there's more going on, there's a tech and innovation economy, I might actually consider it, because research shows people choose places based on lifestyle, amenities, and connection, not just job availability. Tom was really reinforcing this, but and Melody too. Small towns that invest in broadband, housing, safety, and local amenities see more startups, more population growth, overall stronger economies, and this really creates a virtuous cycle. So, a bit of a mouthful of a slide, but ultimately what we see here is just how it can continue to go on and on. High quality of life places keep and attract more people. Highly skilled workers are more likely to start businesses in these high amenity places. Small businesses and firms have a great impact on economic growth. Entrepreneurs increasing this growth in a lagging region. Those small businesses improving quality of life by providing more services that we need and want. The growth of startups in a knowledge economy and local wealth creation and reinvestment builds more quality of life. And then again, you have higher quality of life, so people and places continue to attract. So that's a much more technical way than the elegant way that Melody and Tom were saying it, but to really plug in here, beyond the people, an innovation ecosystem helps create the infrastructure for this cycle to continue and to really, really thrive as a flywheel. But like I mentioned too, of course, it takes leaders. It's all about people. It's not just a vision of, hey, we're gonna do this and it's gonna snap our hands and overnight we can make it happen. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes for rural communities that we've worked with and I've seen across the country to be able to make this successful. So cross-sector collaboration, like I mentioned, your economic development organization, working with education, working with government, working with higher ed, working with the private sector, being open to new economic development models, having a community that's really ready to engage across lots of different ranges of backgrounds. Again, not just the folks who are from the technical school or from the computer science school or have started businesses, but helping people really understand and see themselves as a builder, as a potential entrepreneur or a potential supporter of this, no matter where they sit in the community. Those local champions with time, energy, and influence. I love a story of a woman who is really, really popular in her faith community, really deep in rural Kentucky, and she was the one who would tell people, church on every Sunday, did y'all know there's a small business workshop happening Tuesday? And she was the actual best source of outreach for people because she was really trusted, and folks just gathered around her every Sunday, and she let you know what was going on because it was her son who ran the Small Business Development Center. But it was a really helpful connection to have in that way. So priorities, obviously, are we ready to build an aligned view on what matters most? Where do we want to start? Looking back at that checklist, where are we strong? Where are we a little bit more red and yellow? And so what do we need to, thanks. What do we need to start with first? What really matters to us? Because like I said, it's not about what Silicon Valley did or what that big metro in the neighboring state did, but rather what makes more sense to your community and what folks care about where you live. And your vision. So the leaders can really rally around and tell the story, but the vision, of course, has got to come from the collective, from the bottom up, from here's what we heard. We did lots of focus groups. We did lots of interviews. We heard this kind of pain point from entrepreneurs, Indian food and more. And we heard so much more that we can help inform then what our strategy should be that will really resonate and ensure we're not going to be offering these boot camps and certification programs and trainings that are going to have 1 or 2 people in them. That's really painful. And if you're an economic developer, if you're someone who offers those kinds of trainings, you may have been through that before. It's sort of the same way of coaching entrepreneurs. What's our product market fit? Are we offering the right sized programs and trainings for what our community really needs right now? So this is the model that we help folks think about. How can you build right sized, right place, right time for your tech economy? All the way over on the left, I've been talking a bit already about co-working and entrepreneurship spaces, thinking of that as necessary infrastructure for a tech economy ecosystem. Local leadership capacity as well, highlighted that, and the critical importance of broadband, like Sara was speaking to. We also look up top at an entrepreneurship pipeline. So how are you building those people? What kind of supports are you offering for tech entrepreneurs? Is there incubator programs? Are there, business model boot camps? Are there fail fests or things where people can start to see, hey, it's okay to fail. People have been there, done that. They didn't always get it right the first time. Is there access to capital? Where am I finding that funding once I've got that initial traction, but I'm ready to now build up and scale? Where am I going to find the workforce on the tech talent pipeline? Who's going to come and be that first engineer to build out beyond my prototype? Or if I just graduated or I just completed some sort of tech boot camp, what is the access to tech jobs? Where am I going to actually start to use my experience or my education to build more experience? All of this is underpinned by an inclusive tech culture building lens. So again, acknowledging that this is for everyone and for all folks in the community to feel welcome and to know that there's a place in a program or an opportunity right-sized for them. What this creates in terms of outcomes is quality tech employment and local wealth creation by startups. So local employment, local people starting businesses and hiring their friends and neighbors because they all know that they are capable, they're all working in that same co-working space, they all did a similar tech training boot camp or a startup accelerator, and they teamed up. These are the kinds of things we think are incredibly powerful and can continue to really unlock prosperity at the community level. So like I mentioned, I wanted to walk you through a little bit more of a model of how we help entrepreneurship ecosystems or rural leaders build such ecosystems. All the way at the bottom, you see this bar that says Designated Innovation District with Placemaking Efforts Visible and in Progress. So that is, again, to really speak to the importance of the sense of place, the quality of life, and just acknowledging how much that really does have an impact on the rest of all of this, which is really helping you then build out the community assets that are needed for an entrepreneur to move through their journey. So I like to start at this very early foundation stage, phase 0. And this is all about Main Street and business support for your small businesses, your mom and pops. So thinking about, do we have a thriving culture of Main Street businesses? Do we have a buy local program? Each of these little blocks are like an asset that your community may or may not have. Do we have a chamber that's focused on entrepreneurship? That's real loud and clear here. Do we have a strong SBDC? Yes, of course. Do we have Main Street startup programming? Do we have sort of support programs that our Main Street entrepreneurs can come into? And I need to know how to make sure my taxes are going to be compliant this year. What kinds of trainings are available to them that really ensure they have a strong support system at this very foundational level? Like I mentioned, we focus a little bit more on the levels beyond this, but this foundational piece is so important to your overall quality of life and just the spirit of entrepreneurship, the spirit of what's possible in your community. Knowing that there are thriving small businesses starts to make it feel like, maybe there could be a different kind of business that could thrive here too. Maybe my tech startup could take off as well. So at that foundational level, and this is a little bit too about you can't be what you can't see. We've seen some rural communities that we work with across the country. We've got this network of over 40 communities that all kind of share best practices and celebrate each other and sometimes commiserate how hard it can be to build a rural tech economy. In Pikeville, Kentucky, they're doing a co-starters cohort for women founders, so women in Appalachia training other women on how to start your own small business. So really showing the steps of here's what I did, 4 female entrepreneurs of different backgrounds and different businesses, leading a cohort of other female entrepreneurs through this really intensive training so that they can come out on the other side and be successful business owners and feel that they, again, have that community backing and support. Over in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, a community that is a predominantly African-American population, has a really specialized support for entrepreneurs through a partnership with Communities Unlimited. And again, it's about finding culturally relevant mentors, folks who will resonate with the individuals who are coming to use these services, and partnering in ways that can really help people feel there's trust there and there's relevance to what I'm trying to build. So these are two different examples of how communities have tried to build out their foundational level assets so that there can be more mom and pop and Main Street businesses, and there can be some formal pathways to support folks where they can really feel like there is resonant, culturally relevant support for them to start that Main Street business or to then begin to build potentially beyond it. And beyond it is where this phase of, the ideation or your idea stage begins. And this is what we talk about at Corey a lot, is that foundation stage small business is fantastic, backbone of the American economy, but we also want to help communities create a parallel path for tech economy building. And that starts at this idea stage phase. So, can communities actually find inspiration, education, and validation for future entrepreneurs, or what can they do to build more of that? And at the idea stage, let's see, space, like I mentioned, for co-location and networking. So all the way over here on your left, you see how important, again, these physical innovation hubs, innovation incubation centers, and so on are. You see startup media outlets. So if I'm an entrepreneur, how do I know that there is a meetup happening on every third Wednesday? Where do I go to find the information about who can support me or who's innovating, who's investing in startups? Is there a dedicated Facebook group, LinkedIn group, listserv? In Vermont, they have something called the Front Porch Forum, which is just like an email blast, really kind of old school. You subscribe and you just get some updates on what's going on in the Vermont entrepreneur ecosystem. I think it's a little bit more broad as well, just sort of Craigslist for your neighbors. But what are those sources to get the word out? What are also inspiration and culture building events? So what kinds of things help people just start to experiment with these ideas and know that there is a community of support for them? Where can they build, upon this idea? Ideation workshops, boot camps that can help them start to validate a little bit more and gain confidence. Where can they find ideas? What are the source of scalable tech startup ideas? We've seen things like reverse pitches or hackathons, where community leaders or organizations will present problems or challenges that they're seeing in the community, and then local folks who might have an interest in starting a business or innovating can form teams and come up with solutions or ideas to meet that. There's lots of different sources for scalable tech startup ideas, so many great institutions here of higher ed and research, but really acknowledging that a great tech startup idea can come from anywhere. Necessity is the mother of invention, as they say, and nobody really understands some necessity and challenges of innovation like rural people. So some examples from our network at this idea stage. Really excited to highlight this one on the left, Indie Commons Co-working in Independence, Oregon, because yesterday I was on that innovation tour. We got to see some incredible food manufacturing places, Barnacle Foods and Wild Oven, and I thought a lot about both of those businesses at some point in their inception maybe would have benefited from some kind of commercial kitchen, which is what Indie Commons offers. It's a co-working space, a startup accelerator in the front, really beautiful business, sort of storefront in downtown Independence, Oregon, rural Oregon. And then in the back, they have a full-scale commercial kitchen where food entrepreneurs can come, incubate their food business ideas, and form community with each other. And something cool that they do here as well is called Supper Club, where I think it's once a month. They do a little pop-up, so people get to come into the co-working space. They see what it's all about. They get to kind of hang out, but they're not there to work. They're there to eat some delicious meal sourced farm to table by one of the food entrepreneurs that's working from the commercial kitchen. So that food entrepreneur gets an experience of how to, do a full service night, right? A pop-up where they got to be prepared. They got to have everything in place so they understand what it will take if they one day want to have a full-scale restaurant. And the community actually gets to come into a space that is otherwise meant for business incubation, innovation, co-working, but have a completely different experience and get familiar with the space, and then maybe, who knows, come back as a coworker, or come back as a startup founder. So I love Supper Club. I love what they're building in Indie Commons. I also want to highlight all the way over in Pryor Creek, Oklahoma, a community with a really interesting mix. They work closely with the Cherokee Nation there. They also have a data center in their community. So it's an industrial park, a lot of community needs they're trying to meet, and acknowledging, the industrial park's incentives are just to create a really big workforce, right, for big companies that are gonna come in and fill the space. But they also wanted to see what they could do for small entrepreneurship and for tribal communities entrepreneurship. And they started really small with just a business ideation workshop, 3-hour intro workshop for anybody interested, brainstorming potential startup ideas, kind of be brought through a framework to think about problems and solutions, design thinking. So much innovation is just about acknowledging you gotta start with a real pain point so you know somebody is actually gonna want what you're doing. So no tech background or idea necessary to participate. We make this as low barrier to entry as possible. And something I really liked about Pryor in this workshop is if you see the blonde gal on the far end, the guy sitting next to her is her brother. It was like an intergenerational, just to hang out, kind of bring your cousin, bring your family. And then a little bit farther back, you can't see it, we also had a father-daughter. So people were coming in Oklahoma way as a family, and they were thinking about ideas that they might think would be interesting to start as a family business. And I had not seen that before in any other rural communities where I've done this, but I was just touched by that. I thought that was a nice example of you really never know what you're gonna get when we put these opportunities out in a community. And that can build up further to the launch phase. These family businesses or folks who've got a really good idea from their university or from a reverse pitch event then want to actually start to establish and formalize that venture and turn it into something real. But how do they do that? They may not know the steps. How do I file? How do I become an LLC, or should I be an S Corp? Or what do I do? So incubators, accelerators, pitch events, these are kinds of events that can help you really start to formalize and step into your own as an entrepreneur, or formal programs that can really help you and bring you through the intensives of, this is the legal structure that's gonna make sense. We'll bring in lawyers and you can have some free one-on-one counseling with them. Some of the most valuable experiences I've seen entrepreneurs have are in these kinds of programs where they realize, I'll never forget, one guy was introduced to the business model canvas in an accelerator workshop we were doing, and he was like, wow, I really understand why everything I've done now has failed. And that's a powerful learning. He's like, I did not really ever do customer discovery. And that's, successful startup 101. So sometimes it's just creating the space for people to come in and ask the question that might feel like embarrassing, or they don't know if anyone else is struggling with this, and we sort of destigmatize the idea that you gotta have it all figured out and you gotta be a 4-time founder. So these spaces and places, especially for rural folks who don't see themselves represented in the tech economy as much, are super critical. I also mentioned those resources for starting up, your HR, your legal, your finance. They can be embedded in these kinds of incubators and accelerators, or they can just be, come on down to the co-working space. We're gonna have office hours with a finance pro in the community. We'll help you make sure you're gonna be ready for tax season. And that's a way you can actually bring service providers and help give some business to some other community members and get them a little bit more stoked on the innovation economy. They see there's more people building, there's more people starting businesses. Well, that means more business for me and my small business. That's kind of what I meant before when I said there's this multiplier effect. For every one tech job, 3 to 5 new other jobs are then created. You also want to know that there's people who've been there, done that, who can help you. So having a mentor network and then having that access to tech talent. Who is going to be that first hire? Where am I going to find them? Do I have a nice relationship maybe with an internship or apprenticeship program in the university? Or what are some other ways in which people can really understand, hey, there's opportunities to work both in big industries and nonprofits, but also in tech startups in my community? One community I worked with in rural Missouri started an internship program for students in university to go and intern with their local startups in their accelerator, and it had a profound impact on those students. They surveyed them afterwards and said, do you guys see yourselves actually staying here now, and maybe would you want to work for a startup? And they said, yeah, I had no idea these companies existed here. I had thought that we just had the same sort of 3 or 4 jobs my folks have done. So now I'm really giving it a second thought that maybe I could stay here and do something completely different because I didn't even know these people were here. But this program introduced them. So some examples of that, all the way on your left, and this is one I'm really proud of because I got to partner with them directly after helping this community win some federal funding to this end. Taos, New Mexico, and the Hive Pollinator Accelerator. Taos is a really interesting place, incredible indigenous population, incredible rich history, and also a lot of high net worth folks coming to ski. I'll just be honest with y'all. So there is quite a divide between the Taos Pueblo, community members who have always been there, and a lot of wealthy second homeowners, folks who come in to ski and enjoy the amenities and then kind of fly right out and don't feel as embedded or connected to the local community. Or maybe they just moved there and they don't actually know how to embed or connect to the local community. They want to, but it's not clear to them how they can. So the Taos Hive Pollinator Accelerator is actually a bigger, it's a program within a bigger space, in a co-working space for the community, meant for anybody. Come on down, learn a little bit more about occupational opportunities in tech, as well as starting your business. So they really tried to make it accessible for anyone to come on and learn, but they also wanted to create some parallel paths so it would be really clear that there is truly a space for anyone. So lots of people coming in, maybe from California, wanting to do something with tech or had tech skills, and they said, we'll start a more tech-focused incubator and accelerator for folks who have that interest. But at the same exact time, we're also going to start a really artisan crafts and Pueblo-focused small business accelerator for folks who might be a little bit more in their traditional business building skills, like artisans and indigenous folks have been doing for centuries. But we also want to bring them together so they can start to intermingle and see if there may be opportunities for more tech and innovation for the indigenous entrepreneurs, and if there may be ways to make the tech startup folks have a little bit more cultural relevance and sensitivity to where they're building and what they're doing. So they created this accelerator that had these two different tracks, but they created intentional sort of crossover points where people could share, build together, co-create different ideas and strategies, and really understand we're all a community. We might be having completely different goals and lived experiences, but we're all welcome here under this one roof, and there's a little something for all of us here to try to build and create what we believe should exist in the world, because that's ultimately what it's all about as well, is no matter what your idea is, knowing that there is a physical space and there is a network of people who can help you work through it, that is what the Taos Hive Pollinator is existing to do. On the other side of that, similar but different, in Durango, Colorado, another community that had a real divide between some folks who have been there and sort of seen industry come and go, and then some very high net worth individuals who wanted to come on, move on in from different places and turn it into a little like retirement second homeowner place. And so Durango is a really struggling community in that there's incredible beauty, there's a lot of tourism and seasonal jobs, and the median house price is over $500,000. So what are we to do as local folks from Durango who want to live there and want to raise our kids there, but we can't afford a $600,000 home? And a lot of folks have sort of come in and changed that landscape for us. So the ESCAPE Southern Colorado Accelerator Program is what that stands for, is attempting to provide education, mentoring, and access to funding to folks from Durango who want to start a business, a lot of outdoor recreation startups in this area in particular, but also try to leverage all of these high net worth individuals, second homeowners, people who have come in and really changed the community. How can they actually give back? Can they be mentors? Can they be angel investors? So this program took a really specific focus on trying to ask those individuals and build relationships with them and say, hey, how can you come on down and really be part of this community? There's all of these structured ways that we want you to engage, because it's really important for us to live in peace and coexistence with each other, but that's harder to do if we don't have these kinds of opportunities to actually build trust and relationships with each other and see how your presence here is beneficial to all of us. So how can these individuals show up as mentors, show up as investors? This program has really unlocked a lot of that and created some really powerful relationships. I encourage you to kind of give ESCAPE a Google, because it's one of our more successful programs where we've seen venture-backed companies coming out of rural Colorado taking their products to national and global markets, and a lot of it is because they were able to leverage some retired folks from Silicon Valley who could come in and open up some doors and markets for them, or invest in them when they wouldn't have otherwise maybe been able to raise that from the friends, family, and fools round that a lot of people say is the critical first step to getting your funding. So all of this leads us to this third phase of growth, where startups are actually enabled to prove their value, connect with investors, and resources that are really going to help them drive that growth and scale. And some of the assets we see on this phase are scale and expansion events and support, so maybe a post-accelerator or a program really dedicated to helping you connect with customers. What we used to say in the accelerator I ran in Silicon Valley, 3 C's of entrepreneurship: customers, connections, and capital. So are we connecting people to any one of those things? Are we really helping provide immediate value to this phase of growth where oftentimes startups can fall off? The valley of death, as they call it, is a very real thing. You've made that first couple of good milestones, good traction, you graduated from your accelerator, but you can't quite make it, and this is a really devastating phase to see startups fail. So how can we further strengthen them? Investor networks, funding pathways, more clear programs to help you connect to customers, and really just to help lead to this outcome of a thriving culture and an ecosystem where people see other people building scalable tech startups, they see other people getting trained up in the skills that are needed to be hired, and they're launching and scaling new ventures, they're hiring their friends, and it's creating that virtuous cycle. So some examples of this, Melody talked a lot about different relocation programs and incentives and some of the merits and challenges with them. But in Paducah, Kentucky, actually a place not too far from that other Kentucky community she highlighted, they are doing an incentive program for startups to relocate there, providing cash and local connections, so $50,000, your next 50K, if you will agree to move to Paducah, Kentucky. And we have a specific focus on healthcare startups. We have a lot of hospitals, we have healthcare CEOs. We started this advisory council of healthcare industry practitioners so they can come in and help you and advise you. Maybe they'll be customers, maybe they'll be valuable connections. They thought about what their unique competitive advantage, what their community's assets were. Got a lot of hospitals, got a lot of healthcare. Maybe there's a vertical here where we could do a little bit more healthcare innovation, med tech, try to bring people here and create more of a really specific community around innovation and incentivize folks to see this as a viable path for their health tech startup. So that's one example of what they're trying in Paducah, Kentucky. They've got an accelerator that accepts startups beyond healthcare as well, because again, it's not about putting all your eggs in one basket, but a diversified economic base and a diversified startup base, but acknowledging that they had something special in their community in a lot of healthcare industry and service providers. And that was an asset that maybe wasn't immediately obvious to them as something that could be ripe for an innovation economy. We can build upon whatever it is that we have. So in Durango, we have an outdoor, natural beauty and outdoor. So a lot of their focus is on entrepreneurship for an outdoor rec economy. In Taos, there's a lot of tech, but also a lot of incredible indigenous entrepreneurs. So they wanted to build dual pathways. So thinking about what assets your community has, taking that strength-based approach. Northern Michigan Angels is a group in Traverse City, Michigan, again, acknowledging another place where there's a lot of seasonal tourism, quite a few high net worth folks, second homeowners. How can we rally people around and make their presence here beneficial? Let's start an angel fund. Let's have these local people learn how to become investors. Just like you might be used to real estate investing, let's teach you how to do angel investing. Come on down. So they started this group where they really were just saying, anybody welcome if you could be an accredited investor, and then we'll teach you. We'll form a community. Kind of like what it sounds like the Angel Fund conference here was doing. If you were at the pitch event, you heard about that last night. But this is just a group that got started by one person who knew how to do it, wanted to teach others, and then slowly it turned into a massive network that has provided millions of dollars of angels, now seed capital for startups in that community. And it's really happening everywhere. We have a fund here at the Center on Rural Innovation, so I like to kind of just point out and further reinforce that rural entrepreneurship in action is real. It's happening right now. So just a quick proof point, founders building all over rural America, something that may or may not resonate with Alaska. In Chassell, Michigan, Waldo is an app for the forestry industry. La Junta, Colorado is a really cool farmer-founded I wrote this one down because this is a little hard for me. So it is a, farmer-founded autonomous nano tractor. So a little tiny thing, but they've figured out how to create incredible benefits in precision ag in their community by doing really cool manufacturing or hardware innovation here. I won't go through the rest of these too much, but Waterbury, Vermont, another one where there is really thin, 10 times thinner than your typical solar panel. So it's bendy, and it can also reduce the cost. So folks are Kearney, Nebraska, they're doing something in utilities, Soil Tech in Rupert, Idaho, and I said I wouldn't go through them all, but I love them, and they're all cool. Seward, Nebraska is a headset app, so it's something actually for college football. Shout out wherever Tom is. The folks who, big college football guys in Nebraska, and they said the technology to be able to communicate as coaches on the field is like ridiculously expensive. So they created their own version of this, and now it's becoming pretty popular with other rural colleges and football teams. They're hoping to get to the NFL eventually. But I show this to show whether it's forestry, agriculture, solar, utilities, or sports tech, there's a huge diversity in what people are building. It's not just ag tech, it's not just manufacturing. There's all sorts of problems to be solved that rural innovators are at the pack doing. And we've seen that. I certainly won't speak to them, but y'all heard it yesterday too. I am blown away by what Alaska already has and by what this region already has to build from. Whether it is language learning tools to renewable energy, what Sakana is doing is absolutely amazing. I also learned yesterday about the traditional games. So what a really cool example of incredible cultural, historic, really special tradition that can also be further made accessible and really amplified in the community by an app that an entrepreneur is building. Jessica, I think is your name. If you're in the audience, shout out. But learn about the native games. The traditional games, I was so blown away by her vision for creating a platform to make this more, easily trackable, more accessible, and just bringing some innovation to something that is so rich and culturally relevant to folks in a way that will actually improve the experience for those games as well. And as y'all have heard yesterday too, there's a lot of entrepreneurs building with AI, and I think it's a really special opportunity for rural entrepreneurs in particular. And why? Well, rural places struggle with low population density, right? We don't have the luxury of millions of people who we can bump into who can be our co-founders or our angel investors. However, entrepreneurship, or AI in entrepreneurship, can help multiply your productivity. So your small team can accomplish a lot more, do a lot more with less. And your business might be able to scale a bit faster because you've got some tools now that would replace what a much larger team would do. There's also maybe a limited local tech talent pool. Of course, that can change with the amazing higher ed institutions and other kinds of interventions, but also AI, democratizing technology development, market insight, requiring a bit less expertise. So things like vibe coding, platforms that you can say, I'd just like to build this, show me how it's done, builds it for you, you continue to iterate. This can really help you get over that hurdle of, well, I can't find that software developer, I can't find that person in my community, and just do that first MVP and get it out there and then continue to try to build upon it with some real humans who are tech experts, of course. And then the lack of capital. So rural places, like we mentioned before, the friends, family, and fools, or people who are ready to throw money at your startup might not be readily available. But if your team is smaller, if you're able to do more with less, you can have a more efficient company, and you may then be able to require less capital overall. So I'm not here to prescribe anything. This is purely one option or a model that we've seen work really well in concert with other economic development strategies. But a few things to consider: stopping, continuing, and starting if you'd like to support more rural tech entrepreneurship and innovation economy building. So we like to encourage folks to perhaps stop treating workforce development and entrepreneur support as separate conversations. Seeing everyone as a builder and helping folks who are getting tech workforce training acknowledge that if you've got a good idea, you can then pivot right into being an entrepreneur. So don't bifurcate these two because you think it's real different to someone who wants to be a builder and a learner versus someone who wants to be an entrepreneur. Also, stop waiting for perfect readiness before piloting. I think Guy Kawasaki said, if you are not embarrassed by your first product, you've waited too late. So I really like that for just trying things in your community as well. You're never gonna have all the answers, but just knowing that you can give it a go. And stop assuming, maybe you're not, but just broadly, that rural entrepreneurship needs to look like the urban model, that you gotta take the playbooks and do all the things, that it actually is so much more powerful and special when it's something your community co-creates and shapes to fit your values. Continue using a phase-based ecosystem model that meets your community where they are. So if nobody has an idea yet for a business, or if nobody has an active business yet, or a tech startup, probably not the right first step to build that angel network, right? Because what's their deal flow? What are they going to invest in? So understanding the right-sized opportunities, leveraging your local assets, partnership-driven support is really key here, seeing where your strengths are and how you can really dig into them, and blending that entrepreneurship training with tech capability building, like I said. Something to start is to build those bridges between traditional small businesses and tech-enabled scaling, kind of like that really cool Juno cleaning example. Start creating more peer networks for founders and innovators. If you were on the innovation tour with me yesterday, I kept asking the founders, like, do you hang out with the other guy? Do you guys ever meet up? And I was just curious, like, what is the sense and spirit of community here? Do you all have a strong network? Sounded like really informally, yes, but how much more deep can that go? Start encouraging and experimenting others to try new technologies and tools, and start to demystify that this is only for, people with tech skills or people with a specific background. Because again, in this age of AI, in this age of true internet, right, like I started, anyone can be a builder. Anything is possible. It's about our mindset of what we can do. And every community is different, like I've said too. When you've seen one rural community, you've seen one. So progress may not be linear. It may not look like what your neighbor down the road is doing. Leadership can come from lots of different sources, from an entrepreneur, a volunteer, a local champion, lady who's really popular at church. All of these individuals are really, really critical to come together to help create a really strong sense of momentum, sense of possibility. Flexible, strengths-based approach is really key, helping your community make the most of what you have, whether it's outdoor rec or an indigenous population or fishing or agriculture. How can we build upon this as an engine for innovation? And use AI tools and tech strategies to adapt and fit what works for us, what models make sense. This really could be a leapfrog moment, and that's what's exciting to me. I want to close with a quote. One of my favorite sci-fi authors, William Gibson, says, "The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed." And I like to think about that in the context of rural innovation. Every entrepreneur you coach, every new idea that you are tinkering around with, every meeting you take with a person who's interested in digging in further, maybe being a mentor. All of these little actions are what help to redistribute the future towards one that's more equitable, one where people in rural places, people in Alaska can see themselves as drivers of the solutions, as drivers of the things that they believe need to exist in the world, and know that it doesn't have to be anyone coming in from outside to come and help us or save us or create these solutions. We are the ones we've been waiting for, I like to say, and this is an opportunity to further that. So thanks y'all for having me, and I'm really inspired by what I've seen in already the ways that you're redistributing the future for Alaska's benefit. Thanks. Sorry? Okay.
Okay. So now it is time for questions for Molly. We have a mic on this side of the room up at the front. We also have a mic on this side of the room. I hope you'll think hard about a question you might have or any examples that she shared. We'd love to engage her expertise while she's here. And I'll give you a moment to think about that. Okay.
I have a question for you, and thank you so much for a great presentation. It was really wonderful. How do you see nonprofits and community-based organizations fitting in and supporting entrepreneurs in rural settings?
Yes, I love this question because I actually have a background in social work. And my vision was what if we really could connect community-based organizations, social service agencies, and an innovation economy? How cool would it be if you could walk into a space that you could get your needs met across a whole gamut, workforce development, family support, business incubation. So my vision, or I think a cool potential vision of that innovation hub or a downtown mixed-use space could actually be that a community-based service organization is in there right alongside the startup incubator. But more directly, I think that we help communities figure out who are the right individuals or that that core team of people who you can bring together. It's not just one EDO or one, chamber, but creating that group of people where I think community-based organizations, service-focused nonprofits should be at the table to say, here's some barriers, some real barriers to participation, right? Childcare, transportation, having your business training during 9 to 5 when people are working. All of those are critical inputs to how you're designing the programming and the opportunities. So bringing those individuals in from an outset as part of that core team, seeing them as integral to the overall innovation economy is something that we encourage. And we don't want any one organization to rule them all, right? That's the ecosystem vision, is like find these partners and work together and actually do things a little differently by regularly meeting and talking about what's working and what's not. We're not seeing people show up to our small business workshop and hey, it might be because they need childcare stipends. So how can our program offer that? And so that's just one example, but I would really just say they should be part and parcel of the team that's building this because it's integral to the success of an overall tech and innovation economy.
I guess my question was very similar about who it is that's developing these, in incubators and these things like that. Who's funding it, how it starts, who's leading it, and then, do they let go of it and it exists on its own typically, or is it generally, is it a civic or is it private? I'm curious.
Yeah, no, great question. And it's actually, one thing I love is both of y'all, there's a model of a community we work with in Alabama where it actually is a more social service community-based organization that's taken the helm. And there's a model of a community we worked with in Missouri that someone on the hospital administration board was a huge part of the overall core team of strategy because of some workforce challenges. And overall, how's our community, how's our tax base, how's our population? All of this matters for the hospital, so there's some real incentives for them to be involved. That was a sidebar. It's not your questions, just knowing who you are. But the piece about who owns it, right? It's never we think an organization who's not from there, right? That's why I said at the very outset, Corey, not owners and operators, we are here to be your guides on the side as you, local individual, start this. So sometimes it's just a visionary person who's like visited a cool co-working space when they were somewhere else and said, I want to do this, and then they just start it and they find the funding. We will help them find funding, usually through grants, USDA, EDA, there's construction grants, there's programming grants. Figuring out the capital stack between federal and then private. Are there corporate sponsors? What's the business model that we might be able to employ? So can we have a mixed use here where some people will pay for private offices? Are we going to charge for programming? Helping that person or that leader figure out what their mix is going to look like from the very beginning, super important. But most often it's owned by a co-working space or innovation hub, just an entrepreneurial individual, or sometimes it's a branch of a university, a higher ed wants to take it on. And occasionally I have seen it be part of an economic development organization, but I find it really successful. Whatever format, it's just that leader. How well can they connect into the community? Can they build a network? Can they ensure that the space is offering services or office space or programming or whatever it is that actually would resonate so people will show up? Because there is nothing worse than building these spaces and having them sit empty, right? And then they're not making revenue. They close, and then it sort of reinforces this idea of like, oh, we can't do that here. So that individual person creating momentum, relationships, and excitement to come on in and use the space in all the different ways it may resonate is super important. And oftentimes the business model becomes really clear of who needs this, who will pay for it, and who will sponsor it. And it really does look pretty different in every community, but the local leader having that vision is make or break.
On your left. Molly?
Oh, hey, sorry, I was...
I want to make sure everybody has a chance to. Okay, thanks.
I'll try to answer more succinctly.
Okay.
Hi.
Molly. Bill Leedy. I'm a 54-year Juneau resident and small business owner. Did you mean to aver or even imply that startup is the only possible path forward to progress in any new venture milieu, including small communities? What is your definition of startup, and what do we do with those folks who don't make it as startups? Perfectly well-motivated people. What's the off-ramp you suggest for them?
Yeah, no, did not mean to imply that. It's a one option or one tool in the toolkit of an overall comprehensive approach. So looking at how people can feel more empowered to start ventures, if that is something that would feel right to them in the community, creating those programs and opportunities so that's more easeful for them. The conditions, like Tom was talking about, it's not a question of can people do it, but do they have the support and the resources to make it more possible for them? So that's really the hope and the goal. The definition of a startup is like a temporary organization designed to search for a scalable and repeatable business model.
Oh, good.
So until they find a scalable and repeatable business model, they're still a startup. Once they do, congratulations, you did it. And if they fail, that's actually incredible, valuable learning for them to start that next thing. They might want to go back to the workforce to take a break if they got burnt out, but they could actually, be much more successful. A lot of data shows on that second or third try.
Good, thank you.
Hi. So my question is there such a thing as too rural? Like how rural is too rural, and does it require many of these very small communities to band together? But then the challenge is, what if they're not connected to the road system, or the proximity is not close to each other? How would you address that?
Oh yeah, there is such a thing as too rural for our view in this, in that it doesn't mean your community can't do it. It just means a regional approach, like Tom was talking about, can be much more viable. So thinking about how you can band together. Typically we say if your community is less than 5,000 people, you're gonna wanna look at more of that regional approach and how you can come together with others in the greater area to think about it from that lens. And yeah, geographic isolation, other barriers absolutely cannot be underestimated. That's the importance of what's the broadband look like? What's the infrastructure look like? So yes, acknowledging for one place to say we're gonna be the ones to do this, just us, can be challenging, but from a regional or collective approach, that's how we start to see it happen.
Hi.
Hey.
My question is, and I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, and I think we have a really strong and connected startup ecosystem, but I worry sometimes it doesn't feel inclusive to maybe first time thinking about entrepreneurial adventures. And sometimes I wonder about the language of like accelerators and innovation and angel investing, and it sort of feels very obscure. And I don't know if you have some examples of places where they've made it very accessible to like the everyday person.
Yes. Oh, it's like you're a plant for this question, because you're absolutely right. We learned the hard way some more terms, depending on the community, right? And what that local leader feels will resonate. But some terms like ideation workshop, it's like, what? We don't want to go to that. So we figured out what actually would resonate in terms of language. We're still doing the same thing, still same learning objectives and outcomes, but how can we shift what this is called so that it feels more accessible to you? So from ideation workshop to business brainstorm, right? Like, come on down, low stakes, we'll have some pizza, we'll have some sweet tea, or insert your favorite cultural food here. And we'll just make this a really low stakes environment where the naming doesn't automatically make you feel like it's not for you. So that's where we say it's all really semantics. Whatever the community feels like would resonate best can be trial and error, but you are absolutely right. Sometimes we fail before we even really begin there by naming things way too complex and intimidating, and folks don't realize this is meant to be for anybody. Come on down. So ideation workshop to business bootcamp or business brainstorm was one of those, but happy to talk more about that. Yeah, such a good question.
Hey, Molly. Also from Anchorage. So quick question is sort of for the ecosystem builders and supporters, the investors out there. What sorts of resources or advice have you kind of seen through your experience in different communities for them to keep startups and startup founders on track after the initial pitch? To still be venture scale and actually, venture scale and, actually following that path instead of turning into like a lifestyle business. Nothing wrong with that, but from an angel investor standpoint, that happens quite a lot here. And a lot of investors get burned and they kind of end up not wanting to put more money in, and people don't want to start more businesses because there's no funding. So, yeah.
This is where I think like accelerator programs or networks where you form really deep relationships with those founders is key, because if you can really build a trusting human-to-human relationship with that founder for the long haul of their business and commit to being really hands-on, that's where it does take some resources and some human capital. But let's say from your accelerator, you get some graduates, you keep on checking in, you have a system where like you do monthly meetups or you do one-on-ones like I've done before, you hold them accountable, and it sounds very much like you are kind of the house mother or den mom, but really checking in of how's it going on these 3 milestones, what kinds of customer introductions would you need, providing the real value, saying, I'm going to introduce you to this mentor, did you follow up with so-and-so? You might think, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. You have to basically be on their team. Kind of, I feel like. You do have to really follow up and help them see what that right next step might be. I introduced you to so-and-so. Did you follow up with them? It's pretty intensive on that human side, but I really do think prioritizing a big win, 1 or 2 big wins with these companies, helping them envision and keep their eye on the ball of like, I know it's really hard, but this is what could be possible for you. Now let's reverse engineer the path and keep you honest on it. That's what I've seen be more successful, but you're right. It's not easy.
Thank you.
Hi, Molly.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Good.
I'm over here. So I'm based at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, in the interior, and the UA system has people taking occupational endorsement all the way to PhD. So very, very broad-ranged academic programs within our educational system after high school. Have you got any examples of how that inter-degree academic standing integrates, so you don't just have PhD startup community, occupational endorsement startup community, an undergrad student club where the population size may be small, but you've got people that are wanting to start a company at the PhD level coming in and taking an occupational endorsement, but are in a small business. Have you got examples of how you can work together across such a broad academic standing within the university system?
Yeah, we have seen one example of this where there was a lot of sort of discussion at the higher ed, and like of who should own a business incubator. Should it be the business school? Should it be the College of Engineering? And there was this determination that it should be like a general ed owned by everybody, for everybody, no matter what discipline or background you're coming from. You can come in and be a participant in this incubator. So acknowledging that the program should just be open to literally anyone in the community or anyone in the university, no matter what stage or scale or background. But then how can you kind of create more, like based on what you're seeing, based on what people are showing up with, specialized tracks within that? So is there a specialized, PhD innovation track, or is there one that would make more sense to commingle the computer science students with the business students and see what can happen there? But it is a very challenging problem, but what I've seen is just opening it up to everybody, seeing who comes, and then starting to build pathways or specialized programs based on what those needs are and how the sort of organic relationships and asks emerge.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you all so much.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.